And for more on the scope of this military operation, let's bring in former U.S. Ambassador to Saudi Arabia, Michael Ratney. Now, earlier, the president released a video saying combat operations will continue in full force until all the U.S.'s objectives are achieved, and that there will likely be more U.S. service member deaths before the operation ends. What does that tell you about the scope of this operation?
Thanks, Ike. It tells me that we don't know exactly what the scope is or how long it's going to last. President Trump has made different statements in that regard over the past 48 hours. Today, he made a comment to one media outlet that he has agreed to negotiations with whatever authorities seem to be coalescing in Iran, although he didn't give a time frame for that. He has said, on the one hand, that these combat operations will continue until they've achieved all their objectives. On the other hand, it's not been clear what all those objectives are. I do have the impression that he's keen to wrap this up, if only because at some point this becomes a political drag. But for the moment, it's a bit of a mystery.
Now, the president is calling on the Iranian people to, quote, take back their country now that the Ayatollah has been killed, but has not suggested how the U.S. would help fill the power vacuum. What comes next in a situation like this?
Yeah, the short answer is nobody knows what comes next. You know, we see these images of Iranians in the streets, some quite overjoyed. You have to give them that for the death of Khamenei and the possible collapse of this regime. But the truth is we don't know who takes power in the absence of the Islamic Republic. I think President Trump has talked somewhat optimistically about the people taking power, perhaps in partnership with the police and the other security services. Even in the best case scenario, I think we could be looking at a long period of a lot of violence and bloodshed until some authority coalesces. Hopefully that's an authority that is more representative of where the Iranian public would like their country to go.
Now, what impacts are these strikes going to have on the wider region?
Yeah, thus far, it's been a tremendous degree of unpredictability that has all sorts of impacts, including disincentives to investments. You've seen images of tourists in the Gulf who are stranded. That's got to kind of put a damper on the decisions of other tourists to visit. I think on the one hand, you see Gulf countries, the Saudis, the Qataris, the Emiratis, and others. I think at some level, they'd like to see this conflict de-escalate because for them, much of it is a downside. On the other hand, they're being targeted by the Iranians now, and they've issued statements that are increasingly strident, referring to their right not just to defense, but to response. So I think, on the one hand, no tears shed for the death of the Ayatollah. On the other hand, I think they all have a vested interest in seeing this over quickly.
Now, what else are you watching for as this conflict plays out even more?
So I'm watching for others getting into the fray. I just saw a report, an Israeli report, that there were projectiles fired from Lebanon. It's not clear who that is, if it's Hezbollah or others. If they get involved, it becomes much more dangerous. There's reports of Iranian-supported proxy groups, militias inside of Iraq, targeting facilities there. That becomes quite dangerous as well. And of course, the Houthis are still active in Yemen and pose a threat to commercial shipping, to U.S. naval vessels, and to the Saudis. So watching Iran's proxy forces throughout the region, how they respond, because that could pose yet another level of escalation.
All right, Michael Ratney, thanks a lot for your analysis.